In order to balance out the positivity from the last video, I of course also had to make a list of the 10 worst horror movies I saw in 2022. And just as we did last time, before we get into the thick of things and begin the haters' ball, first, here are all the dishonorable mentions from the past year. The Invitation, Goodnight Mommy, Slapface, Pray for the Devil, They/Them, Uma, and Spirit of Halloween. Alright, starting my bottom 10 list, at number 10 is Morbius. Now yes, one could argue whether or not Morbius is even technically a horror movie. To that, I say number 1, it does feature vampires, which at least makes it horror adjacent. And number 2, no 2022 bottom 10 list would be complete without an appearance from the living vampire. This is a slam dunk pick for one of the worst movies of the year. To be honest, I was actually pretty disappointed with my Morbius viewing experience. And don't get me wrong, I certainly didn't expect it to be good, but based on the jokes and buzz online, I was expecting Morbius to be a lot stupider and to have an abundance of ridiculous scenes like Catwoman or Fantastic Four I could laugh along at. Instead, to my surprise, Morbius was just an incredibly boring, run-of-the-mill superhero origin story with little entertainment value to be had. Truth be told, the most Morbius-related fun I had in 2022 was seeing Sony get tricked into re-releasing the movie into theaters and losing even more money. Next, at number 9, is The Cellar. This was a Shudder release starring Alicia Cuthbert playing a mom who moves her family into a spooky house. And while The Cellar was not the most objectively bad movie I saw this year, it was one of the most pointless. The Cellar as a whole was just a collection of every horror cliche imaginable. It's painfully generic and adds nothing to the subgenre. If you've already seen any haunted house movie like The Conjuring or Poltergeist or Insidious or Amityville, there's really no reason to bother with The Cellar. There's probably 100 better versions of this exact movie you could watch instead. The Cellar easily would have been my least favorite Shudder original from this year, if not for one other horror movie that came out a few months later. And that movie is my number 8, Mandrake. As I said in my full review, there wasn't a single aspect of this movie I enjoyed. Every reveal was underwhelming, the story went in exactly 0 interesting directions, visually it looked grey and uninteresting, and even though I watched this only a few weeks back, I struggle to remember 2 meaningful events that happened during the runtime. I was bored out of my mind during Mandrake, it was such a chore to get through, and if I hadn't painstakingly scrolled through all 325 movies in my 2022 watch list, I would have forgotten Mandrake even existed. At number 7, I have The Requiem. If you've never heard of The Requiem, I certainly don't blame you. This is a shark movie starring Alicia Silverstone that went straight to VOD, and it has a very simple premise. A couple vacationing in a tropical country get stranded at sea with sharks when their oceanside villa detaches and floats into the middle of the ocean. If you think a house floating out to sea sounds absolutely ridiculous, just wait until you see the rest of this movie. The Requiem is a cheesy, cheap-looking, melodramatic shark movie featuring practically no sharks, no action, no suspense, no logic, and no redeeming qualities. Next up at number 6 on my list is Firestarter. Firestarter took what was a fairly interesting Stephen King story and managed to tell it in the least interesting way possible. Much like Goodnight Mommy in my honorable mentions, Firestarter was a completely uninspired remake that never demonstrated to audiences a single reason why it should even exist, or why anyone should watch it instead of the superior original. Also, in terms of casting, I do like Zac Efron as a lead in comedies where he's playing some buff himbo, but he's simply not a believable serious actor. He was terribly miscast as the father here. The entire story hinges on the relationship between the dad and his daughter, and I didn't buy his performance for a single second. At this point, Efron's probably better off sticking to dumb comedies and waiting around by the phone for the call for High School Musical 4. Alright, getting into my top 5, at number 5, I have Dashcam. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it before on my channel, but I am a huge wrestling fan. In wrestling, there is a popular term called go away heat. This is a term for a heel who fails to make the crowd boo them and actively root against them in matches, but instead makes audiences want to turn off the TV and go away due to how insufferable they are. I bring this up not just because I want to see if anyone watching this video would send me a Danhausen shirt, but also because I think this is the perfect definition for the main character of Dashcam. While some would argue her character is intentionally written as unlikable, I'd argue she is so unlikable and so hard to listen to, she actively made me dislike the movie as a whole. At the end of the day, a movie is entertainment, and listening to a complete asshole scream horrible things at the camera for 45 minutes straight isn't my idea of fun. It's honestly a shame because Dashcam did have some cool ideas, and I really liked the director's previous film Host, but I just couldn't suffer through this movie. After Dashcam, at number 4, I have Grimcutty. Grimcutty, much like Slenderman, is a lame attempt to capitalize on a popular online creepypasta, Momo. However, unlike Slenderman, Grimcutty couldn't actually use the Momo name and likeness, so it instead decided to create its own original character called Grimcutty. And that's fucking stupid for two main reasons. Number 1, Grimcutty is just an objectively terrible name. I have zero clue how you even get Grimcutty from Momo. Every time a character said that name in the movie, I laughed out loud. It is impossible to take that name seriously. And as for the number 2 issue, even if the creature was called something like Nono or Bobo or Greg, no name is saving Grimcutty's look. How is this supposed to look scary? How did this creature design get approved? Grimcutty looks like a hybrid between the Honeycomb cereal mascot and the twins from Matrix 2. Beyond having a terrible main monster with an awful name and look, Grimcutty also has an extremely heavy-handed script. Grimcutty feels like a bad middle school PSA, delivering a lame moral lesson about phone usage and the dangers of social media, with about as much subtlety as a shotgun blast to the chest. Getting into my top 3, at number 3, I have Halloween Ends. Of all the movies in my bottom 10 list, this entry bums me out the most. I wanted Halloween Ends to be good so bad. If this is really the last appearance of Michael Myers, and if this is the last movie featuring Jamie Lee Curtis, then we, the audience and the actors, deserved a much, much, much better send-off. Laurie's character wasn't written too terribly, she did have her moments and a fine conclusion, but oh my god was the handling of Myers' character just baffling. Half the movie he wasn't even on screen, the other half he was playing sidekick to a character we just met, and was getting his ass kicked left and right. Even months later, I still cannot believe they decided this was the best idea for a movie titled Halloween Ends. How or why anyone would decide to make the final Halloween movie a nonsensical debut film about a twerp named Corey rather than a simple, straightforward back and forth between the franchise's two iconic leads is simply beyond me. At number 2, the runner-up for the whole year is Jeepers Creepers Reborn. It almost feels like cheating putting this movie on my list. Firestarter, Halloween Ends, Pray for the Devil, even Dashcam look like they had way higher budgets than this straight-to-VOD sequel. At the very least, as much as I didn't like those films, it's clear some effort went into them, while Jeepers Creepers Reborn feels more like a tax write-off than an honest attempt at a horror movie. Jeepers Creepers Reborn is really similar to those shitty later Leprechaun sequels without Warwick Davis, or the later Hellraiser movies without Doug Bradley, or the later Ron Turn movies that were shot in Bulgaria. The kind of half-assed horror sequels that were just made so the studios could keep the filming rights, hoping to trick audiences who recognize the franchise's name and don't know anything about the new movie. For fans of the Jeepers Creepers franchise, this movie is barely recognizable. It should be a surprise to no one. Jeepers Creepers Reborn currently has a 0% score on Rotten Tomatoes. And unless some film critic out there accidentally watches the wrong movie, I'm pretty sure that 0% score is never going to change. Okay, and now number 1, the worst movie I saw in the year 2022, Orphan First Kill. When this movie came out, I watched it, didn't like it, and posted a negative review on my channel. I assumed everyone would feel the same as I did, but to my surprise, that review got quite a bit of backlash. It was my highest viewed video from this year, and it got 325 comments, half of which were calling me a big dumb idiot. In that review, I genuinely wasn't purposely being negative just to get clicks. I honestly just hated the movie and did a video review, as I always do, sharing my thoughts. But now, to be honest, months later, looking back, reevaluating my opinions, weighing the movie's pros along with its cons, I do have to admit, I feel the exact same. Orphan First Kill is still the worst movie I saw in 2022. I'm not trying to be a dick about it. If you liked it, you liked it. Malignant was my favorite horror movie of 2021, and many people despise that movie. In the sake of fairness, I even gave Orphan First Kill a rewatch to see if I was being unfair, but I still disliked it all the same. You can go to my review if you want to hear my full thoughts, but in summary, Elizabeth Furman looked ridiculous as a 25-year-old trying to be 10, William Brent's Bell direction was shit as always, the writing was incredibly clunky and convenient, and the only portion I enjoyed was the first 5 minutes. Unlike Morbius, I had no issue finding scenes to laugh at, and I stand firm in my opinion that Orphan First Kill was the worst horror movie 2022 had to offer. Alright, those are, in my opinion, the 10 worst horror movies from 2022. Please in the comments below, let me know what the worst horror movie you saw this year was. Unless it's Barbarian, then maybe just write that comment on a piece of paper and flush it down the toilet. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, Horror Flicks with Nick. Twice a week I post horror reviews, commentaries, and short recommendations for horror movies you should watch on Netflix and other streaming services. Thanks for watching my bottom 10 list. Make sure to check out my top 10 video as well. Also, since this is the last video I'll post before the 25th, I hope you all have an awesome Christmas, and I'll see you in the new year.